and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning.
You all hear me? Doesn't sound like it's registering, but we'll see how it goes. So, good afternoon, everyone. We're all back at Upaya. And for those of you joining us via the web, we've been up in Prajna at our wilderness retreat, our resident wilderness retreat for the last 6 days. And Rosa and Terry in the kitchen? Oh, there you are, Terry. We're here holding down the fort, keeping the plants growing and the Zendo filled with practice. And we were up in the mountains and along the river. And we were reading Dogen's Mountain River Sutra together, which has become somewhat of a tradition. And it's this time of the year where we all kind of go into the wild and don't shower for 6 days and go hiking all day and, condition the wood and rebuild the fence and cook for each other and practice in this kind of uncommon way, uncommon for us. And it's a time when, for me, I get to know everyone in a different way. That we're like sleeping in a cabin living room together. We're sitting around a fire late at night singing songs. We're doing Zazen not in black, if you can believe it, but like in whatever hiking clothes we have on for the day. And it's become a bit of a tradition to have during this time of the year way-seeking mind talk from a number of brave residents. And so this year, Ramio and Emmanuel and Udo have stepped up and are going to tell their stories. They're kind of give their heart mind, their practice beings on the kind of final breath of this time in nature together. And so I'm going to introduce the three of you very briefly. I'm going to say things that you may not say about yourself. And then each of you will have a chance to talk. We're going in order of age. I didn't know how else to do it. So Ramio's going to go first, and then Emmanuel, and then Udo. And they've all been told they have 12 minutes. And a couple of them have bristled at the length of time they have. So they may go over a little bit, but at 15 minutes, I'll probably bow and ask you to offer your final thoughts. And wherever you are, it'll be perfect. Don't worry. Just notice that I will be bowing probably at some point. So first, I just want to thank you all for taking the step. It's a bit of a rite of passage just to be in front of all of us in this way, and to share yourselves in this way. And I'm going to start with Ramyo, who, as everyone in the room knows, is our fearless chant leader as well for much of our chanting. Though you won't see her with the chant leader's book almost ever, because she's memorized all of the chants. You are the first person I've seen memorize the whole chant book. And you're in our chaplaincy program, Ramyo's chaplain. And you're also the laugh I know I'm going to hear at lunch just about every day while I'm getting my food. You can hear Ramyo laughing over lunch, like from outside. So I look forward. And Emmanuel kind of just smoothly glided into resident practice and community practice, in part because you're no stranger to community life. And yet, I learned recently this is the longest you've been in one place for about a decade, longer than a decade. So I can only imagine there's countless stories from your travels, and I'm really curious to see which ones you pulled out, the ones that have led you to the Dharma. And Udo, this is really for those of you joining us online. We were all there. We had a council where we, or a discussion where we asked about kind of what people's life skills were. And Udo started very humbly and just said, well, I'm a shepherd. I've learned these other things. And I'm well-versed in cyber warfare, too. So Udo has always been the kind of quiet, wise, and disarming presence in our community during this pandemic. I never quite know what other layer you're hiding that I'm going to find next. So just as context, you know, the way-seeking mind talk, Dogen says, take the backward step, turn the light inward. And we've all stepped back from conventional life. This last week, we've stepped back even from our kind of day-to-day here into the mountains, into the wisdom of the mountains, the change, the seasons, the river, the connectivity we feel being in nature. And that way-seeking mind may be present in a way. What turned us towards the Dharma. And we can all kind of reflect as we listen tonight what's been true in our finding the way and joining the way. So thank you, and I'm going to hand the mic to Ramyo. Ramyo, do you have a clip on mic? You do. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off.
I want to start by talking about my father, because he is the reason that I'm here in so many ways. Shinirmal Banerjee, his name. He was born in a small village on the outskirts of Calcutta. He's one of 8 children. He grew up going to school across rice paddy fields, very rural, poor area. He learned to swim in a small pond next to his house. And eventually he made his way to Berkeley, where he got his PhD. And from there, became a full professor of civil engineering at the University of Washington in Seattle, which is where I was born. My dad was my entire world. He taught me everything I know. He taught me when I was little, he taught me how to brush my hair, how to make my bed. He started me on my path of music. When I was 3, he would sing and I would play the notes he sang on the harmonium. And that's how he trained my ear. When I was 5, he started me on piano lessons and he would stand by the piano and turn the pages for me when I played. And if anyone tried to talk, he would say, "Shh, Rock is playing." When I was 6, he started me on violin lessons, and he came to every single one of my lessons. And I don't know if you've heard a beginning violinist, but the sounds that initially come out of that instrument are not pleasant to the ear. But he was there for everyone, and every night as I was falling asleep, he would sit on the ground next to my bed, and he would put his arm on the bed, and I would hold his arm and fall asleep. And sometimes he would think I was asleep and try to get away. I'd be like, "I'm not asleep yet." And then he died when I was 9, and I lost my entire world. I learned viscerally, irrevocably, that you can lose what you love the most. That experience of unconditional love followed by total loss has shaped everything about who I am. It set in place in me questions that never stopped. What is this? Who am I? What should I be doing with my life? What even is this world? I think a lot of folks go through some kind of existential angst as a teenager, and then somehow just manage to let it rest. Most likely, if you're listening to a talk at a Zen center, you're not one of those people. And obviously, I'm not one of those people. As I accomplished more and more of what felt like success in life, those questions only grew stronger and more frustrating. And at some point, a number of years ago, I was married to a wonderful man. We had bought a beautiful condo together in DC. I had a meaningful and successful career. And I just kept thinking, this until the grave. And here I am 6 years later at Upaya Zen Center, divorced, divested of my assets. I quit my job. What have I done? What had happened was, I came to a session in July 2016, and that was the dividing line in my life. Before session, after session. I jumped into Zen headfirst with that session. I had never sat Zen before, and I found complete and total gratitude. At one point, I was sitting on my cushion, tears just flowing down my face with gratitude and joy for each breath, for each heartbeat. Gratitude that I had finally found a way to approach life, to approach those questions. Gratitude that I had finally figured out what to do with my life. Nothing, just sit there. So I kept coming back to Upaya for sessions, and each session brought me a new insight, not at the head level, but something I deeply felt to be true, that sort of noetic quality that people talk about, knowing something to be true. Those insights, I have nothing, I have no control. It is not for me to judge. Give up, everything's already here, darling. And be earnest and take refuge. So be earnest and take refuge is my North Star precept. When we go through the chaplaincy program here, they ask you to say define for yourself, what's your North Star precept? What you remind yourself of when you feel lost, when you lose track of yourself. Be earnest and take refuge. So those are actually 2 of my personal 10 commandments, or 10 precepts, if you will, or in actuality, 10 bullets that I wrote down on my notes app on my phone after Rohatsu this past December. There was a moment after the session ended when I realized, oh, I'm not actually Zen. It's a bit awkward to be giving this talk at a Zen center. But I'm not Zen or Vedanta, which is the tradition I grew up in, or anything else. I have my own religion that I'm following. So for the rest of the time, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes. Oh, great. I want to share with you all my religion, my own spirituality, the guiding principles of my spiritual journey, the things that I have found to be true, have confirmed in my bones, as we say. First, find big self inside. So sometimes in Zen, we talk about big self. Usually when we talk about self in Zen, it's the little self, the personality, the piece that we confuse ourselves with, that has attachments and schemes and plans and hopes and dreams. But there is an experience in Zazen of something that's so much bigger. Sometimes we call it emptiness. Here at Upaya, we often translate it as boundlessness, which feels more accurate to me. In Vedanta, it's called Atman, that piece of divinity that rests within each of us. And on the supreme scale, it's called Brahman, the undivided divinity that is in fact everything, that is manifesting as this relative world of all these different, separate, seemingly separate beings. And the thing is, we can actually find it inside ourselves. And in finding it, there is total freedom, because you see that you're not just this little self, this particular body and thoughts. You are the same divinity that is manifested in all things. So when this body goes, you are still fully manifest as the divine. There's a Sanskrit chant in my Vedantic tradition. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It can be translated as, all this is full, all that is full. From fullness, fullness comes. When fullness is taken from fullness, fullness still remains. Om, peace, peace, peace. So that's the first one. Find big self inside. Find that inner divinity and know it to be true, and live from that space of that knowledge, because it changes everything. 2, trees as the model. For years, even before I came to Upaya and began my spiritual journey, I would say, when I grow up, I want to be a tree. I mean, who could be so lucky, am I right? Like, just look at them out there, just majestic, tender, so beautiful, standing with arms outstretched, facing the world with total engagement in wind and rain and sun and cloud, rooted in the ground, providing shade and shelter to creatures. For so long, I wanted to grow up to be a tree. And when I received the precepts in the Jukai ceremony last March with Pearl and Shoyu, I received my Dharma name, which is Reimyo, which means spirit sapling. It's a growing up tree, so amazing. So trees is the model. 3, and these are in no particular order, by the way. Parent little self lovingly. This is such an important one to me, and I feel like it can get really lost. Like, I feel like my little self is just a little baby, you know, tired or cold or hurt or lonely or sad. You know, it's just so important to take care of it like a loving parent. You don't scold a toddler. You love it completely, and you show it how to be in the world. So that's what we have to do with ourselves. When we're not behaving the way we want, it's so important not to shame ourselves, to say, that was so bad, you stupid kid. A loving parent wouldn't do that. First, you comfort the crying baby, and then you help it figure out what it can do better next time. So many people, I think, have a hard time loving others or being open because they haven't figured out how to love themselves. It's just so important. So parent little self lovingly. 4, structured practice. So what we're doing right here, right? When I first tried to start meditating, I was doing it by myself, just reading a book and reading how to do it from a book, and I just kept falling asleep. So I didn't have structured support or a community or scheduled times to meditate, so it never really got off the ground. Having this Sangha of support of all these sincere bodies sitting together with you, knowing that you have to be in the Zendo at a certain time of day, for me, it's so necessary to get into that rhythm of spiritual connection. 5, gratitude. So in my notes app, I wrote gratitude for each breath. And then in parentheses, I wrote, what even is it? Really, I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe if you're a doctor, you know what it is, but I don't mean like that. I mean, on a fundamental level, what is it? What is a tree? You know, what are these things? When you stop and really see the world as it is, then you see, as Roshi says in our Jukai ceremony, everything is fresh and new. And it really is. And you can't not feel a tremendous gratitude to be here, to be in it, to be it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 6, earnestness. So this is the first part of my North Star precept. And often in Zen, we talk about wholeheartedness, but for me, earnestness is the word that really captures the kind of heart feeling that I try to conjure when I'm in the Zendo. Am I being earnest? It feels like a kind of loving trying. It's not striving, it's not straining. You're trying, but in a loving way, in a sincere way. And as I see it, that's the work that we have to do. That's our part of the deal. I'll get to the other part of the deal later. 7, take refuge. The other half of my North Star precept. And in parentheses on my notes app, I have the only refuge. We try to take refuge in so many things, in work, in food, in drink, in Netflix, in social media, even in other people. We try so hard to take refuge, to make a safe place for ourselves in this world. And yet there is no certainty in this world. Never, ever. We're seeing it now much more clearly because of the pandemic, but this is a world of change, of uncertainty. And the only real refuge is in our inner divinity. In a world of total spinning uncertainty, there is a place of solidity. There is a place to rest within ourselves, within that boundlessness that can be found within. And what I think that really is love. That's the secret. 8, joy in seemingly bleak truths. Zen can seem really bleak. Everything I said just now can seem a little grim, but in some of the insights that I mentioned before from my sessions, I have nothing, I have no control, it is not for me to judge, surrender. These things can seem bleak to a lot of people, but there's a freedom and even a joy in recognizing these things to be true. We think we have so many things, but in renunciation, you realize that renunciation is not giving up things you have, it's seeing that you have nothing. I'll speed through the last 2. Okay, okay. Yeah, okay, okay. 9, grace. So that's the other part of the deal that I mentioned. A phrase that came up for me so many times when sitting is, thy will be done. Grace to me is the other side of the deal. Realization or enlightenment or seeing through the self or even insight, it's not something that we do. It's something that comes to us through grace. So our part is to be earnest, to have the discipline to sit and open ourselves up to grace, to be silent and wait for divinity to speak within us. And sometimes it may not come. And all we can do is persist, to keep sitting, stay open, stay present, ground ourselves the best we can in love. And then I am convinced that true love, that boundless love will manifest itself to us, within us. Okay, this is the last one, maybe the most important one for me. Trust yourself. Just like this is my own religion, I believe that we all have our own religions. We're all following our own paths. And while it may be in the container of one religion or another, we are all such unique manifestations. We learn in different ways. We're moved by different things. We're drawn to different aesthetics. All of this matters for the spiritual journey. So like in the Zen Center here, it's so important not to bow as a Zen, just as a Zen form, but from your own heart, from your deep humility, from your personal sense of Buddha, recognizing Buddha. And I believe that we're being guided by the divinity within ourselves, by our inner gurus, so to speak. So when insights arise, we should follow them, listen to what they have to say, trust them, trust yourself. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this container, for Roshi, for creating this container for us, for this Sangha supporting me within it, for my teacher, Joshin, for my Uncle Jim, who's a monk at the Vedanta Center in Seattle, where I grew up, for my mother and my found family, for everyone who supported me in my life to bring me to this point, and for my father, who is always with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ramiel, for a beautiful talk. And thank all of you for being here and sharing this experience with me. You know, I've spent the last 3.5 months trying to sit like a mountain. Now I have to sit like a mountain and make my words flow like a river. And I'd like to start with a prayer I wrote about grace in the mountains of Switzerland, mountains that are home to a powerful river that is fed by the melted snow of mountains. May the gift of grace flow through me and back into the world. May I recognize and appreciate all the grace that has been in my life. May I create the space to see a bigger picture and to find a more meaningful reason. May I have the grace to embrace whatever comes my way. May I have the faith that life will take me where I need to go and teach me what I need to know. Today, may I share the gifts of grace that are in my life with the world. Amen. Rivers are thought of as symbols of grace. They embody the fluid flow of grace. Mountains are often the place I go to have a shift of perspective, to see a bigger picture of life. When I'm in the open spaciousness of mountains, I am often able to find more meaningful reasons for why things have happened in my life or why they are happening in the world. There's a feeling of transcendence that takes place when you are above the clouds of distraction and delusion and face to face with the mountains. In the presence of mountains, problems, fears, or situations that seemed bigger than you and bigger than life are suddenly shrunk down to size. When you are face to face with the mountains, you see how small you are and how small your problems are in comparison to the enormity of the world. Almost everything is given a perspective that makes it more manageable. The closest I'll come to evoking the spirit of Dogen is to say that mountains aren't always mountains. So what are your mountains? What are the places you can go to that gives you a different perspective of life, that reveals a deeper truth to you? And I'm at Upaya because of the mountains and rivers of Nepal. Nepal has been a country that has been a river that has constantly taken me to the next stage of my life. I've done formative meditation courses there. I've done service work that grew out of my experiences in Nepal. I was in the earthquake in Nepal. I created a pilgrimage because I was in the earthquake in Nepal, and it was the first one I created and led. And I've been on a few treks in those magical, majestic mountains that have changed my life. When I recognized that out of all the places in the world, I met Roshi in Nepal, it gave me the courage and trust to come to Upaya and to try the chaplaincy course. My recognition and appreciation of Nepal gave me the courage I needed to trust that life would take me where I need to go and teach me what I needed to know. My intuition told me to come to Upaya a few weeks before the chaplaincy program started. I was coming from Uganda and quite a different lifestyle, so I wanted a few weeks just to have some time to settle in and prepare for the transition. I joined the chaplaincy program because part of the river of my life had run dry, and it was time to find and join a new body of water to have a new injection of life. I also wanted to have a more structured study of service and spirituality and how to combine them. I wanted to be able to integrate and understand the experiences that I've already had in my life in a deeper way. And I was also looking for a community or a Sangha to join in America. As Kozan said, I hadn't spent much time here in the last 10 years. So I was looking for people that I could learn from, that lived interesting lives and that I could share a spiritual path with. Which brings me to the line of my prayer that says, may I have the grace to embrace whatever comes my way. And that is a practice that you need to do every day and that you need to be present with. And I'll be honest, it's not something I'm able to do every day. I was supposed to go to Italy after the chaplaincy course, so I was going to work there with my dad. But it quickly became apparent that that wouldn't be an option. After 10 years of traveling and looking for a home, I had finally felt like I found a feeling of home in Uganda. But before I was even able to think about going back there, the borders closed and it wasn't even an option. Which left me at Upaya. And while I immediately felt blessed and fortunate and understood that Upaya was the place I was supposed to be, and the place I needed to be during this time, it still came with a mindset of, I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't supposed to happen to me. And learning how to embrace something that comes into your life in a different form than you expected it to be or wanted it to be is a fundamental spiritual teaching that happens every day. We spend so much time trapped in the mind state of, I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't supposed to happen to me. And when we do that, we block growth, we can't cultivate anything, and we can't see the opportunities that live in where we currently are. But it also takes time and is a process to make that switch from I'm not supposed to be here to I am supposed to be here. It's a process that you can't force or can't be rushed. And after 3 months of being here, I finally feel I'm able to embody the mind state that says, I am supposed to be here. I've been blessed to spend time with some of the world's great rivers, especially the Ganga and the Nile. I've been to the source of the Nile in Uganda, which is a peaceful and quiet place. I've seen hippos and crocodiles and elephants and tigers alongside the Nile in a park in Uganda. I've stayed in a village on the banks of the Nile in Egypt. I've seen the Nile's big city manifestation in Cairo. I like to think of the different forms and life cycles the river makes, the Nile makes as it makes its journey from Jinja, Uganda to Cairo, Egypt. I like to think about its clean parts, its dirty parts, the different animals that live in it, the villages that are built on its banks, the clothes that are washed in it, the crops that are watered with it, the times that it dries up, the times that it overflows with water, the directional changes it makes, and the different bodies of water that join it and make it what it is. Whenever I'm in an important place in my life, I like to think the river of my life and how it slowly made it to where I am now. I like to think about the roundabouts, the twists and turns, the places that were a struggle and my river dried up, the places that it rose up and moved fast and took me where I needed to be when I needed to be there. I like to think of the journey I've made since my birth to bring me to where I am. And being at Upaya, I also think of the residents' journeys. I think of Roshi's river and all the places her river has gone and the journey it's made. I think of the confluence of Upaya, how it brought us all together. And being able to do that makes me see the bigger picture of my life. It helps me find a more meaningful reason for why I am where I am. Rivers have a way of getting to where they need to be. Life has a way of bringing something into your life that you needed to have in your life. But the problem is, a lot of the times it comes into your life in a different form. We don't recognize it. It doesn't come to our life in the time we wanted it to. And that is exactly what's happened to me since I've been at Upaya. I didn't get to meet my chaplaincy group in person, but being a resident at Upaya gave me the chance to make a much more powerful Sangha, to find people to share the Dharma and path with. When I look at all these individuals out here, beautifully sitting like mountains, as unique and special as all of you are individually, together we make a more powerful mountain range. A mountain range that goes further and shines more powerful. It is so much stronger than individual mountains. And I know that when it comes time to branch off into the world, the time that we shared together, the melted snow that we created together, will create rivers that will be able to serve. We'll be able to navigate the world in a way that spreads the Dharma. Sometimes we are further up the mountain. Sometimes we think we are further up the mountain than we really are. And that has been a part of my experience being here. In many ways, I thought I was further up the mountain than I was. My spiritual path had taken me all around the world and had taught me so much about life. But in many ways, my spiritual path also skipped many important stages. You can't just get to the top of the mountain because it's the place where you want to go. You have to get there step by step. You have to keep on walking. Much of my practice since I've been at Upaya has been centered on learning how to meditate again. It's been about coming down from the mountain and starting over again. It's been about slowly crossing rivers and making my way through the parts of the mountain that I skipped. If you want to get where you want to in life, you can't avoid or escape certain mountains. There's no way around them. You can't skip over them. Eventually they will reappear again. You have to face and climb them instead of living in the shadow of their blocked view. We spend so much of our lives staying where we are instead of climbing the mountain to a new place and to a more fertile land. Clouds can easily cover the mountains that we need to climb, which makes it much harder to see them, and much easier to pretend that they don't exist or they aren't there. But one day you will see them. You need to decide if you're going to climb that mountain or not. Even the thinnest clouds can cover the biggest mountains. I've been in places in Nepal where the clouds made it so you didn't even know there was the world's largest mountains right there. And then one day I woke up and the clouds weren't there. I was face to face with the world's biggest mountains. They were all I could see. As a world, we have a mammoth mountain range to climb. The tools of avoidance or pretending that the mountains aren't there, that we don't have to climb them or that we already did climb them, don't work and never will work. They aren't going to get us to the top of the mountain. And people all over the world are ready to climb the mountain. They are tired of being at the bottom of it and looking up at it. And this is what we are seeing taking place all over the world. We are ready to climb the mountains of racism, injustice, sexism, and inequality. We can't avoid them or pretend they aren't there. We can't act like we already climbed them because it is more convenient for some of us. Those mountains are there for everyone to see. The sun of truth has burned away the clouds of delusion, distraction, and ignorance. And if you aren't ready to climb them, it means you will eventually be left behind. And from my experience of climbing mountains, I can tell you it's a lot easier to climb mountains together, especially if you don't know how to navigate the terrain. It's hard to do alone. It's easy to get lost, to not know the way, easy to give up, and to want to stop. But when you walk together, you find ways to keep on going. You find ways to get to the top of the mountain. And I believe that we can finally see the mountain that we need to climb because of COVID, because of the murder of George Floyd. These two things aren't the forms that we wanted these truths to take, but they have shown us what we need to see. They have directly shown us that we are living in a closely connected world that isn't sustainable. They've shown us that we need to make changes, that we can't keep on living the way that we are living. We can't continue to live in an environment that is polluted with greed, racism, and injustice. What have these pandemic and protest times brought into your life? How can you embrace them? What have they brought into your life in a different way than you expected or didn't want them to? And I'll end with the last line of my prayer. Today, may I share the gifts of grace that are in my life with the world. What are the gifts of grace that you have in your life? What are the abundant rivers that can quench people's thirsts and nourish their soil? What can you share with the world? How can you help people get to the top of the mountain?
So we were studying Mountains and Rivers Sutra of Dogen in the mountains. And probably there are many ways to understand and to study Dogen. But as a beginner, not as a scholar, I would like just to enter through the poetic way. And for me, one of the sentences of Mountains and Rivers Sutra was mountains are walking, mountains walk, which is quite cryptic. But I really feel that mountains walk and mountains have been walking with me. I feel like mountains have been like witnesses of my life. Mountains have bear witness to my journey. And my journey began by the side of the mountains in Cali, Colombia, South America. And Cali is by the side of mountains called Los Farallones de Cali, beautiful mountains. By the side of those mountains, I started my journey from a very, very early age. I started exploring different traditions. I really had a thirst for knowledge, a thirst to really understand the mystery of this universe. And I started my quest through try many forms of meditations, try many forms of understanding the world. But from those traditions, probably where I found my first tutor was a Swami in pilgrimage in South America. He found in a ashram just for a couple of years in that city. And he was my first, my first master. And from him I heard for the first time the story of Buddha, which I remember clearly now after many, many decades. And in the way that he told the story of Buddha, there was a line, I'm not sure if it's part of the legend. I haven't read it in our text in Zen. But he said, at the moment that the Buddha had the awakening, just at that moment, everybody on earth felt peace, was at peace, at least for 1 second during that moment of awakening. And that, let's call it part of the legend, stuck with me. How is possible that something that you do in yourself can reverberate, can reach the whole world, as if you don't know where you end and where the world starts. Like in some way, there is no boundaries. And that was the notion that the contemplatives, I think that's the word in English, hold the world. And I try to explore that path. Was it possible to really build in my own heart, in my own interior, that world that I dream for everybody? Is it possible to nurture that peace, that harmony, that love inside myself, and then offering to the world? So that was one of my main points of work. And at that time in Colombia was a time of unrest, where all the youth was trying to do something. And mostly the idea was to change the system, to do something for the people. Even remember a graffiti in the streets that says, el que quiera vivir en serio necesita definirse, o necesita comprometerse. Because the one who wants to truly live, he needs to commit himself. He needs commitment. And that was in the context or calling to the youth to join the rebel armies, just to transform the system via violence. And when I talk to my friends that were talking about revolution, at some point it's as if we're talking about the same. But my idea of the revolution was different. I wanted to do that revolution, but inside my own heart. Many of my friends went to the mountains, but to fight in the guerrillas, join the rebels. But I went to the mountains. I also left everything behind when I was 18. But I went to the mountains to join a spiritual community and just to live a life of prayer, work, and silence. That was my way to start my own silent revolution. So there was where my path truly started. In the mountains of Colombia. I went to the south of Colombia, and beautiful mountains. Every day I could see the volcán Puracé, which in the native language means mountain of fire. And by the side of those mountains, I started my spiritual path. Just being a simple peasant, a countryside, but immersed in prayer and simple work. And I remember the burst of silence, the burst of joy, of just living a simple life, working in the countryside, but at the same time, holding the suffering of all the people of my country and the suffering of the world. And that's one of the mysteries of contemplative life. How can you be touching the depths of silence and peace, and at the same time, touching the deepest suffering of the world? The path is long because my life has been long. But there it started my whole path with the spiritual life. And eventually I moved through different communities until arriving here to USA. And last year, I decided to reset completely my life, to start from zero, to start even with a different tradition, so I can be really a beginner again. I decided to burst the bubble of my comfort zone, and I chose Upaya to start that process. And now I am just in this state of not knowing. I don't know what my next step will be. But whatever is next step, I think the North Star is there, which is the same that it was at the beginning. Try to help, try to do that inner revolution, which is at the end is just to serve and to love all the people, the ones that are with me at this moment, and try to reach even more, even further. So now, by the side of the mountains of Montañas de Sangre de Cristo, I feel that they are also bearing witness to my path, to my not knowing. Thank you.
we sit in this quiet zendo day after day, morning, afternoon, evening, and hearing the three of you reminds me how deeply we're woven together. Your sincerity and big self, attention to the mountains and rivers of your practice, and grace and peace and courage to fight the revolution that's in our hearts, gives us all the strength to practice. Certainly gives me the inspiration to remember the Dharma, to take refuge. So thank you for sharing in this way. And we should do this more often, right? Maybe? Yeah, okay. I know that these will be online, they'll be on YouTube, and will also be in our podcast. And I'm going to publicly suggest, so that you have a harder time getting out of it, that they may be things to write as well, and to share about your time coming to this crossroads in your life. Things to offer as kind of reflections to people. So that's one thing. The other is I have some mundane announcements to make, which I think all of you know. Actually, one of them we haven't talked much about, but I know everyone, our Mahasangha may not know them. And one we do know, which is that on Saturday we have Zazen Kai that Munchin's going to be leading us in. So we'll start early in the morning at 6. We'll have a full day of practice. And there's also, for those of you who want meditation instruction or have been looking for a kind of introduction to Zazen, I'll be offering that with Joelle from 6 to 7. So that's kind of the beginning of the day. And it's a separate link, but if you sign up for the program, you'll get that link. The other is that Awakening Action is this kind of incredible day of teachings from is it 12 or 14 women, Noah, this kind of incredible group. I was like, I don't remember. This incredible group that Roshi Joan has brought together to teach for the whole day on attending to the kind of social justice and ecological justice and the things in the world that require our compassionate action today. Call for compassionate action. How to do that, what it is to do that in practice, and to step into this time of incredible upheaval. And so we've just come from taking a kind of in-breath and learning from the mountains and the rivers of the Pecos wilderness. And this is our out-breath and our kind of collective teachings on what it is to be in the world right now. So I know we're going to be attending that Sunday, and I hope people sign up, even if you can't be part of the whole thing. I think to get the schedule and the details, just sign up on our website. So we'll end by chanting the 4 vows together.
Creations are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.